Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning to our honorable speaker and all participants for today's workshop. Welcome to our 2023 workshop on the Academic Training Unit, Center for Applied Learning and Multimedia. And for your information, Prof, this workshop actually in conjunction with the National Training Week 2023. Thank you for everyone who are joining our workshop entitled I Am a Teacher, I Am a Thinker. So for your information, the QR attendance just now is only for University Malaysia Sarawak staff, and for who are outsiders, you are needed to register yourself in the National Training Week website. First and foremost, I would like to introduce our honorable speaker for today's session. Before that, Prof, I am Nur Mazlina Ghazali, a moderator for today's workshop. Forget to introduce my name. I am also under Academic Training Unit. Okay, Professor Dr. Faizah A. Majid, under Faculty of Education, UiTM. Her academic background are in PhD Adult Education and Professional Development from University Kebangsaan Malaysia in the year of 2004. She holds a Master of Art teaching English for the foreign language, right? From University of Reading, United Kingdom, 1999, and she also hold Bachelor Education in TESOL, University Kebangsaan Malaysia in 1993. She is also expert in adult and higher education, TESOL, ESL reading and writing, as well as professional development. Her research interest is in reflective teaching and professional development. She is also being recognized at international level, which become distinguished scientists in adult education by Venice International Foundation, Chennai, India on August 2019. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor to start her sharing. I would like to remind all the participants, if you have any query, you can turn on your microphone or you can write your question in the chat room. All right, so I think that's all. Over to you, Prof, to start your session.
All right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam Malaysia Madani. And a very, very good morning to you, moderator, for the very kind introduction of me, as well as for the secretariat, Madam Dayang and the rest. And of course, to all the participants this morning, thank you for joining me this morning. Thank you for sharing your valuable time in the next 2 hours to listen to the little sharing that I have this morning. I would like to start by the recitation of Ummul Kitab Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha. Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen. Okay, before I venture any further, I have a declaration. This is actually a talk I gave during my professorial lecture sometime in the year 2021. Yeah, as you can see on the slide, the date is so beautiful that I don't want to scrap it away. I could easily take them out, but I thought, because I need to explain that this is actually a talk I had earlier for my professorial lecture. And the date 12th of April is 12421. So it's like a reflective, right? So we're talking about reflection here, inshallah, this morning. So when something of reflective a nature, like the date, I thought it is kind of symbolic. So that's why we've got 12 and then 21 at the end of the date. So anyway, welcome aboard to my world of reflective practice. And of course, from the title, you can guess it's a lot of thinking. And when we talk about being a teacher here, I'm using the term teacher to also refer to everyone who teaches. You could claim that you are a lecturer. You could claim that you are an academic. You could claim that you are a trainer or you are an instructor. Or you would say that I'm a guru, I'm a cikgu, I'm a sifu, I'm a mentor. Be what you want it to be, but the bottom line, why are we there doing what we do? We teach. All right. So, but the idea of teaching is not just a simple notion of one person coming into class give a talk on something and then leave the class, and that is considered teaching. I beg to differ, and that is why I have this title, Unravelling the Art of Thinking in Teaching, because you are not a teacher, you are not the educator, instructor, mentor, academic, or lecturer that you claim you are, unless there's a lot of thinking in that process. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to my next slide. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is actually my, what do you call that, the agenda. Wow, it's like a meeting, yeah? These are my agenda for today, and I like to share this agenda with you. In other words, in simple terms, it's like the content of my 2-hour speech, yeah? We're going to talk about the what, why, and how. I'm referring to teaching, the act of teaching. And then we're going to touch base a little bit about thinking. I'm not going to go too deep into what thinking is all about, because I think everybody has some idea what thinking is. But the reason why I brought it up nonetheless is to ensure that we're on the same page. What kind of thinking are we talking about here when we talk about thinking? And slowly I will bring you into the journey of putting thinking in our teaching process, in the journey of us claiming that we teach our students. Do we really teach our students? Unless there is a lot of thinking happening, then I would say yes, you have done teaching. But if not, maybe there's something that all of us, including me, all of us need to consider. Whether did we do justice to our students? Did we teach them when there is no thinking in the equation? And of course, from there, we're going to go into thinker teacher. It's a term which I coined during my professor lecture, and I haven't seen it being used elsewhere, not by any other educationist using the word thinker teacher. If you see any articles using the word thinker teacher, I dare say that it would have come from my professor lecture, and also my book. I have a book on this, yeah. So thinker teachers, and it is kind of synonymous also with dialogic teaching or dialogic pedagogy. So if you look at the word dialogic, you can understand the root word is dialogue. So it's a dialogue. It means that at least there are two people communicating. So that is why when we come to the fourth agenda, or the fourth content, I'm going to talk about having dialogues in your classrooms, in your lesson. And then so what? The takeaways are very, very important. I've attended many talks, but at the end of the talk, you as a participant, you will always ask, so what? What do I take home with me? Why do I go back and share with my friends? Why do I go back and share with my colleagues, with my students? So inshallah, at the fifth agenda, there's some takeaways for the wannabes, for the thinker teacher wannabes. And finally, I'll share with you the two formula that has always been driving me, the force behind my passion for teaching, and the motivation that I have every day when I wake up in the morning. Besides, I thank Allah for this opportunity, but also to be reminded why I do what I do. Okay, moving on. All right, in a minute. My next slide. Okay, the what, why, and how. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to start by sharing with you this quotation from Descartes. If you know him, yeah, it was mentioned, cogito ergo sum. If you were to read, you just Google Descartes, and he has this very famous quotation: "I think, therefore I am." What does that mean? It means if you're not thinking, then you're not human. That's a simple thing. What differentiates us from machines, from robot? You would say Chat GPT now, such a cliche now, Chat GPT, all that artificial intelligences. Yes, they can draft an essay for us, but they drafted the essay based on the analytics, the data analytics. But the human value, choosing putting faith in it, putting feelings, putting emotion into it, is actually a lot of human work. That is what Allah has told us. The Almighty, the great Creator, has told us that even for us Islam, we recite the Quran most of the time, and there are many times in Quran it's also stating that at the end of the day, mankind is the Khalifa, mankind is the leaders, and there are various reasons why God the Almighty put us here, and one of the reasons is for us to lead wisdom. And wisdom is not in artificial intelligences, wisdom is always with the humankind. And because of that, I'm talking about us teachers here, yeah. We are the person who are nurturing the future generation. We are that particular person with that responsibility to mold the and shape the future of the country, the future of the world in a larger scale. So when we talk about you as a teacher and you do not see thinking as one aspect that you need to include in or embed in your teaching, I fear that we may not be human. Okay, you're not really human or humane to your student in the sense that it could be some injustice. And what I have also on this slide is from the perspective of Islam and the religion of many of us here, inshallah. Islam, and I'm sure it's also quite a universal value. If you are a Christian or if you're a Buddhist or if you're a Hindu, I'm sure you would agree that the very reason why mankind is special of all the creation is the fact that we have responsibility. And this responsibility leads towards the need for us to question, the need for us to analyze and verify certain things. In other words, when you see something, you don't take it at face value. There must always be wisdom coming in. Where are you to check on that information? Facts, go for facts. If you want to make decisions, you don't make decisions impromptu. You don't just make decisions by the spur of the moment, by listening to what others have just gossiped to you or what you have heard without realizing whether it is actually a fact or whether it's just a hearsay. So in Islam, it says that it's the responsibility of everybody to personally question, analyze, and verify. So likewise, when you attend meetings, right? When we attend meetings, you've always got the chairperson and you've got people reporting and you've got people presenting something. As a member of the meeting, you shouldn't just be sitting down there and hitting the seat. You need to be able to listen and reflect on the presentation or on the discussion, and you need to actually voice out your opinion. And in Islam also, and these are what I have in the brackets will be the verses, the relevant verses from the Quran. It also described unquestioning mind as polluted. This is kind of very, very critical and agenda in our religion, in the sense that if you do not question, then you are the one who's polluted. When you think that when you thought people who always question and question and question are the polluted mindset, actually in Islam is the other way around. If you have an unquestioning mind, you are polluted. So that is a bit sad. So we don't want, especially when we are teachers, when you are teachers, there's a word that goes with that, guru. So when they say guru, you are the one with the knowledge, you are the one with the wisdom. So what do you do with that knowledge and wisdom if you prefer to remain quiet? And finally, in Islam also, in the Quran also states that for people who unreason, for example, you are listening to me now, you should be thinking, you should be questioning whatever that you're listening from me now, and try to put that in perspective. Whether have you ever experienced that? Do you actually feel that? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And you might have reason. So those are the things that I encourage you to do because it shows you are thinking. And you know what? Also in our Quran, the final bullet says that if we don't reason, if we don't reason out, if we are unreasoning folks, then we are subhumans. So that is something that we need to also consider. So I'm not saying that it is in our KPI as academic or as a teacher, but I think that is our KPI as the Khalifah, as the human being that God had created. Okay, now when we talk about what, why, and how, I wanna start getting the ball rolling already. It's time to think. So let's begin with this question. So we are truly clear, so that we are truly clear why we are here. What is teaching? What words come to your mind when you've got the word teaching? Now, this is actually dialogical in the sense that it's intra-personal. It's between you and your mind, and you don't have to respond to me. But if you want to, I welcome. You can just unmute yourself and say something. I will stop and allow you the time. Let's have it dialogic if you want to. But if not, it's between you and yourself. At the back of your mind, what is teaching? Think of those words jumping around your mind when you think about teaching. Now, Jeremy Brunner is a very familiar name to those who study education, like me, for instance, and I'm sure some of you are from the education discipline. Jeremy Brunner is is one of the sifu when it comes to what is education. So to him, I have actually assisted your reading by bolding the relevant phrases. Just look, if you can't read the whole thing, just look at the particular line which I bold, participate in the process that makes possible the establishment of knowledge. So this is what we know already about constructivism, the learning theory that says constructivism, construction. So it's like when you go on a ride, on a driveway, and then you see a building being built, right? And you call that as a construction site. It's being built level by level. You cannot go to the highest level unless the lowest level have been established. So likewise, in learning, when we talk about constructivism theory in learning, it talks about, it's a whole thing about the process. So when we talk about the process, it's not the teacher's process alone. Teaching is always associated with learning, teaching and learning, T and L. It doesn't say teaching alone. It's always say teaching and learning. And learning doesn't stand alone. Learning also comes with teaching. And the idea of teaching, you must also open your mind. Teaching does not only come from you being the responsible person who's paid as their teacher. Teaching could also come from the students amongst them when you encourage them to have discussion, when you ask them to come up with a project, when you assign roles to them, and everybody has a certain part that they have to play. So that is what we talk about, that process. And one very important word is the word participate. The participation. I'm sure you have heard about the word student engagement. So why we talk about learning is actually a process of participation in the establishment of knowledge, because we believe that when somebody put together in a group, like what Vygotsky said, the zone of proximal development, there's always a more knowledgeable others in that group. You can be the knowledgeable other to others, and another person can be your knowledgeable other. In other words, everybody has their strength, and put together all this strength, you can work wonders. All right. So moving on to the next slide. The next question is why. Just now was the what, right? So you know that teaching and learning is all about participating. It's all about the process, and it's all about establishing the knowledge. So it comes with a lot of thinking and working as a team. And then we said, then why? Why do we bother? Why do we bother doing that? And of course, I like to bring us to the very simple word that sometimes it's too simple that we tend to ignore. Sometimes it's too obvious that sometimes we tend to forget. The niyyah, or rather in Malay we say niat. Your niat, the purpose. So in this instance, there's a hadith from Muslim I like to share with you, and I think this is also universal. You wouldn't disagree with this, I'm sure. We have for us Muslims, we got Allah, right? And Allah did mention that Allah will not look at our face, will not look at our wealth, but instead He will look at our heart and our deed. So how handsome you are, how beautiful you are, how rich you are, how cool you think you are, or how educated you think you could be. But it is what you have in your heart that determines why you do what you do, or what you do what you do, and why you do what you do, and how you do what you do is your niyyah. So that is why I think, go back to that very simple question. When you first sign up to become a teacher, remember when you ask for this job, whatever job you are now at, whether you're at UNIMAS or whether you're at UITM, you tried so hard to get that job, right? You submitted your CV, you applied for the job, and you waited, you prayed every day to be shortlisted, and you've been shortlisted to the interview, and then you went to the interview, you pray harder and hope that interview will be on your part, it will be on your side. And when you receive that offer letter, appointment letter, you were so happy, and you reported for duty. And among the things that we do when the day that we came to report for duty is when we sign our aku janji. So what is it that our declaration, what is it that we have promised to the institution? That we will be holding our integrity as the teacher, as the lecturer, as the academic, as the supervisor, as the mentor. So that is your niyyah, actually, for you to give your best as a teacher. So go back to that. And this one is from Syed Muhammad Nakib Al-Atas, because we are so into education, right? I can't but also quote from Syed Muhammad Nakib Al-Atas. If you do not know who the person is, I welcome you to Google him, or you can also go ChatGPTing him. All right, he is the person that really talks about the philosophy behind teaching, learning, education, economic development, the nation prosperity, that all boils down to education and educating. So that's Syed Muhammad Nakib Al-Atas. So in the book, The Concept of Religion and the Concept of Ethics and Morality, this is what he had to say. To know how to put what knowledge in which place is wisdom. All right, sometimes we have the knowledge, but sometimes we don't know how to put the knowledge accordingly. So when you don't know how to put the knowledge accordingly, that is not wise. So wisdom is when you know to put what knowledge in which place. So that is wisdom. And in this instance, this is what I said earlier, if you recall the thing that I mentioned earlier about human being, about Khalifa, about we are better leaders compared to the robots. In fact, we are still the best creation of Allah, not the ChatGPT, not the AI, not the, all that machine learning that we are so excited about. They all actually came from us because we created them, right? But when the human factor is not there, they are not really the best. The best is still the manusiawi, us, the people that Allah created. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Now, finally, that was the why. So the how, So the how is the big picture of what this talk is going to be about. Yeah. So I want you to picture your how. You are an educator, right? You're a teacher, right? So how do you teach? Yeah. You have to tell me. This is a question that you answer yourself. How do you teach? Is it you come in? Is it stereotypical of what you admired from your previous lecturer last time? How you like to be taught? You have a role model, and then you try to teach the way your role model taught you, or whether it's templated in the sense that you look at the best practices and then you just adopt and adapt those best practices, or it's the same old, same old. You've been teaching 20 years. So every year in, year out, it's the same slide that you use. It's the same approach that you use. So that reflect you as the thinker teacher, if you think you are, yeah? Or maybe you are not, and stuff like that. So at this point of time, I'd like to share with you pics. Yeah, I'm gonna move this a bit. All right. Okay, this is from BICS. If you have been following Ministry of Higher Education, we've got this training center called ACAPT, yeah? Academy Kepimpinan Pengajian Tinggi, yeah? ACAPT. If you're in the university, I'm sure you would know what ACAPT is. That is our national training center. So I have gone to ACAPT many times, being trained by big names that ACAPT brought in to train us, the educators at higher education. And one of the person that I had a chance to berguru, to learn from, is Biggs himself. All right, and from Biggs, he has this model. And this model is very classic because it came in the year 1999, but it is still true until now, yeah? It's called 3P's model, in the sense that, guys, whenever we talk about us teaching, this is actually what we do. We will go through all these 3P stages: the research stage, the process stage, and the product stage. And at the research stage is when you consider factors when you want to teach. So you have student factors and the teaching context. The student factors, we consider who are the students, what background, what age, what do they already know, their competency. Are they at the high end, or are they at the middle range, or are they at the lower end? So that means what scaffolding, what extra material do you need to provide for your students? So that will be at personal factor, yeah, at research stage. And at situational element of the research is your teaching context, meaning, are you teaching them in the lab? Are you taking them outside? Do you have the industry to come in and to co-teach with you? How are you gonna assess your student? What are the kind of activities that you brought in, because it will suit the learning objectives of the day. And then the process itself, this is when we refer to the learning approach, to Biggs, yeah, whether it is deep or surface. So if you Google Biggs and his deep learning, you will understand deep learning is actually talking about serious, active student engagement. It's not just about giving them a task and after that they submit and then that's it. It's giving them a task where they need to explore deeply. That's what it's called, deep learning. Surface learning is unfortunately a simple notion of learning, preparing the students for a test. So this is something which, if you are so much into preparing your students to sit for your test, to sit for the final exam, so that at the end they can get A, and then when you report your results analysis, you will say that more than 50% scored A and stuff like that, and you feel good about it. Unfortunately, I want you to ponder, did you really train them to become that professional architect if you're in the architectural, the professional engineer if you're in the engineering? Did you just prepare them for the test? You're supposed to prepare them for the real world. So what did you test them? So surface learning, actually, it's kind of quite synonymous with, simple teaching, and then ensuring that the students is able to do the minimum. So that is something which we need to also consider. And of course, at the end of it is product. To three-piece model by Biggs, the final P is the product. So the outcome of it, the quantitative, the qualitative, and the effective of it. Okay, I welcome you to Google more about Biggs. If I were to elaborate about this, the three Ps, it will take me the whole day. But this is something for us to start our discussion with. Okay, the nature of learning, I'm sure you guys will go through all this. This is something which I'm sure everybody will go through when we teach. Number one, there's always three things. Yeah? Just now is the three P, right? Research, process, and product. But in the nature of learning also, it's three things. The input, in this instance, is your lecture, it's your material, whatever that you give to your student, that is the input. And at this point of time, I'm sure you have heard about Bloom's and his taxonomy, right, from the lower order thinking skill up to the higher order thinking skill, whether it's cognitive or psychomotor or affective domain, right? So we prepare our students, we scaffold their learning process by preparing the material, by preparing our slide, by presenting our lecture to them. That is the input. However, the question is, why is it that similar input, students have different output, right? It is because of the intake. What happens at the mind of the student? Because students are not empty vessel where you pour in the knowledge and you expect everybody will have the same knowledge. Because students have different prior knowledge, they have different interests and motivation while they are there in your class, and how they process the information differ. How we interpret certain things different, right? Because we look at our window to the world. Everybody has their own way of interpreting things. So that is why, although it's the same input we give to all your students, but some students get it, some students didn't quite get it, and some students are totally lost. All right. So because of this, again, the processing of the information. So that is called intake. And finally is the output, where you actually get to see the performance of your students. So going back to what Biggs mentioned just now, surface and deep learning is actually your student performance. Are they able to go deeply and apply and evaluate, or are they just able to list down, understand, and describe full stop? But higher than applying, up to a level of evaluating in Bloom's taxonomy like cognitive domain. If they can't do that, then that is something which we need to go back at the input and intake. What opportunity have we given to the students so that the intake process will enable them to go deeply in their learning? Okay, moving on. Now, upon listening to Biggs three Ps and then the three stages of the nature of learning, I like to share with you my own three P. This is something which I wrote in the year 2005, and I still use it even now when I teach my students. I like to refer to Biggs, and then I like to refer to the nature of learning, and I bring them to my notion of the 3P model, my own 3P model, where I said teacher present is your input, student practice, student has to do it, and at this point of time, I'm sure you have heard about fully guided to semi-guided to full independent work on the student. And finally, student produce. You need to see their performance, because you need to gauge their ability to obtain the competency or the skill that you have just trained them with. So and at that level, at the T, present, student practice, and student produce, I've got some keywords that go with it. When teacher presents, actually your input is the external stimuli. So one of the things about learning that we've known from Pavlov, right? Pavlov and his dog. There's always external stimuli and there's always reaction. You do something, there's always reaction. So that for you to encourage your students to learn, there must be an external stimuli to them that would interest them, that would motivate them, that would spark their prior knowledge, that would prompt their prior knowledge, that they're able to make connection, to make relevant points or relevant information connected and make whatever that they're learning new from you meaningful. So that is your job, your presentation, to ensure that your input is like a stimulation, yeah, to your student. And the student, you need to consider students have different learning styles, hence information processing also different. Even amongst us, some of us are field dependent, some of us are field independent. We are right brain dominated, some of us are left brain dominated. So these are all personality traits that Allah created us is in our DNA. You can't change that. But there are certain strategies that we can train our students, regardless of how they process information. But when they apply the strategies are one thing good about it is that they can be trained regardless of what your preference of learning is, whatever your personality is. The strategies are finite, they are specific, and they are trainable. So what you do, activities that you give to your students should be based on the strategies that you are training them. And of course, at the end of it, when the students produce, when you talk about student engagement, you want not only your feedback, but also student feedback, and the student to also do their own assessment on themselves, do self-appraisal. Okay, very, very quickly, now slowly going into what thinking is, yeah, that's our second agenda, yeah. So in this talk, I have this two formula, T equals T equals T. So T, the first T is thinking equals to teaching, and teaching is equals to thinking. So why do I have that formula? You see that in a linear form, but it's actually kind of cyclical. That's like magic. It's stated that like it is linear, but actually it is cyclical, where thinking is central to teaching and thinking is also central in teaching. So in other words, this is what I'm going to share with you. What do I mean by being central to and being central in? Being a tassel person, I can't help but play with the language, play with the preposition. So central to has a different meaning, central in has a different meaning. I will guide you to that in a while. And my second formula is I am T squared. I am T squared is referring to I'm a teacher, I'm a thinker, so the T squared, teacher, thinker, hence the thinker teachers. All right. Okay, moving on. This is from me in the year 2021 and from the professor lecture that I had. Okay, second agenda, thinking. Guys, I know everybody knows what thinking is. I'm not going to tell you what is thinking, but just to ensure that we are all on the same page, thinking has these three what do you call that? These adjectives, yeah? Three adjectives to describe what is thinking. Number one is active. The brain is processing, the brain is just, and you are trying to processing the information from various angles. You are listening to me now, and then you try to relate to what you already know, and then you try to make evaluation, you try to make that judgment whether agreeable, disagreeable, why you agree, why you disagree. So it's all happening there. It's very active, and it is persistent in the sense that you don't stop. It's persistent because you are in search of the answer. You're in search of the final solution. So that is persistent. And all at the same time, thinking is only thinking when it is also careful consideration. When there is careful consideration, when you also bring in factors like logic, factors like cultural values, factors like geographical facts, historical, those are the things that come in as you try to make a certain judgment on something that you're listening to now. And all these things are coming in to help you determine on your acceptance of this new knowledge, of this new information. So thinking, three adjectives again: active, persistence, and careful consideration. And this is from Dewey himself. Dewey is also, besides Jeremy Brunner, Dewey is also another guru, yeah, when we talk about thinking, in particular thinking. So that's one. Okay. And from Johnson and Siegel, the science of thinking. This one is the scientific explanation of what thinking is that we want to be seen as wise. So we want to say, oh, these are facts and these are opinion. These are based on observation and it is triangulated with several data. If you have done masters, at least a master's, or even in our first degree last time, we in order to graduate, we have to do our final year project, right? It's like a research based. So when you collect the data and then you have to interpret the data so that you can come up with the findings, right? And your supervisor will tell you these findings must be substantiated by relevant theory or relevant literature or similar findings from past studies, for example. So in other words, you can always give your opinion, which is your interpretation of the finding, but your supervisor have also trained you, yes, can you substantiate this opinion of yours, of what you think the finding is telling you by relevant theory? So that is thinking. It's not just, I think she's beautiful. Full stop. Yes, that's your opinion, but why do you think she's beautiful? So there must be, there must be a data to support so that I would also agree and can be convinced by what you said. So this is what it means by thinking, yeah, distinguishing facts from opinions. There must be observation, there must be like data where you check the reliability of those evidences. And of course, it's all about being systematic. And I think for those who have done PhD, yeah, we are an independent researcher by the time we graduate with our PhD. For those who did masters also, if you have done masters, there's a component in your master's program that train you to be a researcher. And I'm sure you know what I mean when I give you these 4 points on the slide. Okay, and I can't but also share with you the whole brain model. Just now remember I mentioned about the right and the left side of the brain, whether your brain right brain dominated or left brain dominated, whether you are the creative person or whether you are the logical person. So that explains your domination, your brain domination. And the good thing about when we train our students, the strategies, remember I talked about you can be brain dominated, left or right brain dominated. Nobody's going to change you. That is your trait. That's in your DNA. However, what differentiate one student to another when they say that they are better, they can become better and better by the day in terms of their performance, would actually be their strategies. So in other words, what I'm trying to tell you here is that as a teacher, when we train our students with the relevant strategies, regardless of which brain hemisphere they are domination, yeah, they can still be performing to their level best. And this is when we talk about students can move from being right brain dominated to left brain dominated and vice versa. So what I'm trying to say here is that there are certain tasks that require logical. For example, interpret the data. But there is also a certain task that require the right side of the brain. For example, come up with a poem. Describe your feeling now in a line or two. All right, so you need to find the adjectives to describe your feeling now. So it's not logical. It's very much of being creative. All right, so that is why in the reality of life, we need to use whole side of the brain, the whole brain. But unfortunately, because of our personality, not to say unfortunately, but because of the uniqueness of us, we tend to become either left or right brain dominated. But it doesn't mean that we cannot do tasks which are dominant on the other side of the brain. That's what I'm saying. But what do we do as a teacher? We train them how to do it. All right. So that is why thinking styles can also be different because of the brain dominance. Okay. So move on to the first
Oh,
formula.
sorry.
Yes,
Can I
Brenda,
ask you a
sorry,
question?
that Mazli, yes.
The previous, yeah, the previous slide, the
Uh-huh.
previous slide.
Yeah.
Have you heard my voice?
Yeah, I can hear your voice.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. On this slide, you mentioned about the left and the right brain,
Right.
and there is a when I saw when I see the picture, the diagram, it looks like the characteristic,
Mm-mm,
isn't it?
mm-mm.
This is the characteristic on the
Right.
left and the right. So
Right.
do you okay, I would like to ask you whether this characteristic can be trained
Okay.
or it is inherit from the initial stage of the development of the people.
Okay. Thank you. Very, very good question, Dr. Mazlina. Okay. So very good question. Actually, it's true. When we were born, right, we have certain DNA that describes who we are as a unique individual. And there are certain traits that we carry from our parents. And this is I'm talking from the from the biological perspective. But Allah is so great that He has created us the way He wanted it for a good reason. Because we need to complement the community that we are in, So that's why we think about working as a team. We're not alone. So yes, coming back to your question, in a way, just look around you, look at your friends, and look where you are. Are you in the blue zone? Are you in the yellow zone? Are you in the red zone? Are you in the green zone? These are personality traits. That's why you can see people who is very, what do you call that, very expressionist, how they dress, the jewelry they put on, and then when you are in a discussion with them, they will be the one who will come up with ideas you never thought of. They are out of the box kind of person. They would think something like that. I'm sure you can imagine one person, at least you got a friend who's like that. And you could also have somebody who is very prim and proper, come in with a very structured way of dressing, ironed. The shirt must be ironed and very sharp at the end. If it's not sharply ironed, they don't feel like they are comfortable. And when they say things, it's very, word per word. It's very well structured. Their lines, their line of conversation is very well mannered in the sense that they don't. And sometimes you can predict how they're gonna react because that is them. It's kind of like very structured. Them. And you also have someone who can be quite empathizing, because he's somebody who's also like thinking of others, and then we come in with the idea of, let's look at the big picture. We need to also feel what others would think about this. So when you've got someone like that, that's a person on the right brain dominant, but in the red zone. And you also have someone on the left-hand side, where just now I said somebody who's very structured and whatnot. Likewise, but still this particular person will be the one who will remind you, hey, follow the procedure. You are not following the book. So, at the end of the day, the lawyers will be reminding you, we need to refer to what is right and what is wrong. All right. So that is why you have all this personality amongst your friends, and you could fall in any one of that. But one thing that we must also understand, although assumingly I'm in the red zone, it does not mean that I am not blue. Does not mean that I'm not yellow or green. I'm all that. I'm all that because it's here. It's my brain is not just a quarter of it. My brain is all four sides of it. But I'm more dominant right down, bottom right. But I have all the whole brain with me. So what we do as a teacher is to train them Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. Ta-da, that's the answer. Edward de Bono has 6 colored thinking hats, the white hat. The white hat is actually the white hat. If you ask questions or you give tasks to your students that is relevant to the white hat, you are actually you are actually training them to use their left side of the brain. Okay, the black hat is the devil's advocate, where they need to consider risk, where they need to see potential threat. They need to see what would the others say differently. So that is also from over here. You would also have the yellow hat. You have the green hat, all the colors of the hat. So what I'm trying to say is that train your students so that they use whole brain by giving them relevant tasks. And of course, these tasks come with questioning. So that is why I've got the word thinking, and I've got the central to teaching and central in teaching. So far, so good, yeah, Doctor? Okay, moving on.
So far good. So far good. So means as a lecturer, as an instructor, we have to consider this characteristic for us when we are assigning the assignments and the examination to the students, right, Prof?
Correct. That's very true. And you need to give them the opportunity so that they can use the whole brain model. When you know your students are very creative, but you want them to also be organized so that they don't become a fool. You want them to be prepared. So you give them activities that require that, the tasks that require them to use the left side of the brain. Right. At the same time, the students are very, very scientific, very fact-based. But at the same time, you want him to loosen up a bit, enjoy the world, because in reality of life, there's also that flexibility. So you want to give them something that train them to use their intuition, where they need to also integrate feeling into it. So that's why you need to have variety of tasks that require the students to use the brain model. All right. Okay, moving on. So this is the first part of the equation, central to. So I have a circle. If you look at my slide, on one side of it, there's a circle, and inside the circle, there's a dot. So that is central to. So when we talk about a central to, you could refer to any dictionary. This is what it means, central to. Yeah? Being a language person, I'm playing with the use of preposition here. So anything central is in the middle of something or essential to it. So when I say thinking is central to teaching, I'm saying thinking is fundamental. Teaching begins with thinking. I'm saying you cannot start teaching without thinking first. So that is what it means. Central to teaching, meaning to say teaching begins with thinking. All right. Moving on, making life simpler. So the focus, the T, the first T, the teacher focus is, if you don't do any thinking, you are not teaching at all. So this kind of a teacher is what we call the reflective teacher. I repeat, the first formula in the equation, T equals T, this is where thinking is central to teaching. In other words, it's fundamental, it's essential. You are not teaching unless you do thinking. The teacher himself or herself must begin with thinking. And to elaborate this in the process of teaching, there's a term in the literature that calls it as a reflective practitioner. All right, okay. And on to that, and bit by bit, I'm sharing this with you. Now, if you also are familiar with Cope and the experiential learning, he has this model, when you teach, for example, now, okay, now let's talk about us here. All right, you are listening to me, and maybe this is totally new to you, or maybe somewhat new to you. You have heard it before, but you don't quite really understand it, or maybe you are also clear, very expert in this area, and but then you want to check whether that is still true or hold true or not, So Cope actually explain this process of us trying to decipher and concretize the new knowledge in what he calls as the this learning model, the learning cycle model. So it begins with something which you observed and reflect. Like now, you're observing me, you're listening to me, and you're reflecting, you're asking, you have the interpersonal question. And then you try to form abstract concept. You're forming abstract concept by relating it to what you already know, by relating it to what you have experienced, by relating it to what you had felt before. And then you test it in new situation by saying, can this be happening in the future? Would it change how I feel about teaching now? And then you apply it and becomes a concrete experience. So to Cope, nothing can be concretized, macam you semenkan kan, nothing can be concretized unless you go through all these three stages. So there's a lot we talk about: testing, failure, retesting. Retesting, successful, proceed. So that's what it means here. When we talk about the learning cycle model, is that you have to go through the meal, in the sense that you have to go through the process. Okay. Next, okay, this is from Wallace. This is another interesting model that I really, really like. All right. It says about how we ourselves, although we are educators, we are also a learner. I forgot to mention this earlier. You are never a teacher unless you first realize that you will always be a learner. All right. So in this instance, if you want to constantly improve yourself as an educator or as a teacher, look at what Wallace has to say over here. At the end of it is a professional competence, right? So this is us practicing. This is us teaching. 10 years teaching, 20 years teaching, 30 years teaching. This is us. But how do we always improve? Well, how is it that we become wiser and wiser? There's a very famous quotation: 1 year older, 1 year wiser, right? Because 1 year older, you have gone through this. You received knowledge through your training, and your experiential knowledge through what you have experienced. This, if you are from the Faculty of Education, you were trained to become a teacher. You were given all these theories to become a good teacher. Look at the Faculty of Education; they prepare teachers, right? Or the Teacher Education Institute, like UPSI or IPG, Institute Pendidikan Perguruan. So what they gave their student, for example, I'm from the Faculty of Education also, what we gave our students are theories and also what we have experienced as a teacher ourselves. But this pre-service teacher, this teacher to be, when they go out and teach, some theories wouldn't work. Some theories work differently. So that is what we call the experiential knowledge, because it depends on the context. Here we talk about use a lot of technology. Students these are the Z generation. They like to use TikTok. But when you go to your school in the remote area where there's no access to the internet, that idea need to be revised. So this is what we call about what you receive and what you experience need to be, analyze and reanalyze, evaluate and re-evaluated. So when you have that, that is what it's saying here. So you practice it, you reflect, you practice, you reflect, and then you practice again. That's why what I said earlier, you practice it, you reflect, try, it's a failure. Try again something else. You practice, you reflect, oh, better. Then you improvise. So this is what we call, even in my instance, yeah, I've been in the teaching profession easily 30 years already, since 1993 when I first graduated with my Bachelor of Education. I've been in this field 30 years. I could never claim that I am expert at teaching because I'm still learning. I thought I am expert until technology comes in. I thought I'm an expert until ChatGPT comes in. So there's always new challenges for me to learn so that I can encounter the challenges I would have when I face the new groups of students. I'm growing older, and new generation coming in, and they've got different values, the different way of looking at things. Even the task assignments that I give to my students, what I give to my students 10 years ago may not be relevant to my students now because they have different motivation, they have different interests. So if 10 years ago I could ask them to write an essay, but now instead of the essay, I could ask them to come up with a video, and stuff like that. Although I love. So this is what it means by when we talk about professional development as an educator ourselves, we are always a learner. So this is a very interesting model. Okay, so at this point of time, I'm sharing with you another interesting quotation from Shavelson. Yeah? It says, and if any teaching act is the result of a decision, either you are conscious about it or you are not conscious about it. It's all about making decision. So here, I've got this gear. The thinking begins with you learning. That's why I said, teacher is always a learner. Teacher needs to learn. When teacher learns, teacher make that decision. You observe your student, your material sucks. You observe your students, your material is too easy. You observe your students, your material is too tough. So you need to change your material, correct? So whether you realize it or you're not realizing it, you are always constantly making decision. And that decision making involves a lot of thinking. Okay, so over here, these are some areas of teacher competence that I'm sharing with you. Theoretical knowledge, attitudes about learning and whatnot, you can just see it from here. But what is more important that I want to share with you is this decision making that we do as a teacher. When we plan our lesson, when we come into class and teach, and then we evaluate what is happening in the class and after the class. So all these stages requires you to reflect. When you plan, did you think about your student? When you plan, did you think what they already know? So how can you make use of what they already know to acquire the new skill that you want to? That is your planning. When you teach, did you observe your students? Can they follow you? Are you too fast? Are you too slow? Are your materials comprehensible? Are your materials too easy? When you have taught them the assignment you gave them, the kind of activities you give that you can evaluate your student, would it be following Bloom's taxonomy? Would it be following your learning objectives? Are they the relevant assignments that you give to your students? Is it testing what you need to test them based on what you have taught them, in other words? Okay, so over here, before you go to class, while you teach, and after you come out of the class, that's what we call the pre, while, and post. So that is what we call the planning decisions, the interactive decision while you teach, and the evaluative decision when you go out of the class and you start thinking, how was the class? Did my students get what I asked them? What did my student understood me? And stuff like that. Yeah. Very beautiful mug I have here. Let's have coffee. But what is more important is for you to read what is on that mug. It says, life as a teacher begins the day you realize that you're always a learner. Yeah, always remember that. Yeah? You are only a teacher when you realize you're always a learner. So that is something very, very interesting. Okay, second part of the equation. Are you guys okay? We've done almost 1 hour. There's another hour to go. I hope you're still standing strong or sitting highly motivated there. Okay, second half of the equation. Thank you, Dr. Mazina. All right, what is this? Tina is requesting to annotate. Can we approve that?
Sorry, Prof. There is
Over here.
someone,
Yeah.
and I don't see anything.
On my, I just approve, yeah?
Yes,
Tina
just
alias is requesting to annotate. All right, I just approve. Okay, moving on. Okay, so thinking equals teaching is the second what do you call that, second half of the equation, where thinking is central to teaching, where teachers are lifelong learners, the life-wide learners. Yeah, it's lifelong. Have you heard of this? Lifelong learners and life-wide learners. It's a term that is in a way buzzed now, in the sense that life-wide meanings you don't just know your subject, you need to know more. You know, you're not just an expert in your discipline, you need to also be what do you call that, expert in various contexts, so that you can bring it into your class. So in this instance, I've got teachers reflect in action and reflect on action. Okay, I did say earlier, teachers are reflective practitioners. Okay, the second part, yeah. Jeng, central in. Just now was central to, right? So what does it mean by central in teaching? Meaning it's main, chief, or principal, primary, predominant, or dominant. So just now, central to teaching, it begins with thinking. But when thinking is central in teaching, the teaching practice itself is thinking. All right? I hope you're following me. Yeah? So in this instance, if just now the focus is on the teacher, you begin your teaching with thinking. When teaching is central in teaching, it goes to the student. It goes to the student. What do the students do in your lesson? You need to give tasks or opportunities for the students to think. So when they don't think, they're not learning. So that is what it means by second half. The first half just now, thinking begins with you as the teacher. When you plan, you come and teach, you also think, you make evaluation and then you finish your class, you go back, you also think, how did the class go? All right, so that is central to teaching. Central in teaching the focus goes to the student. The student needs to do thinking. So over here, if students do no thinking, they are not learning. So first half of the equation, thinking, teacher don't think, teacher not teaching. Second half of the equation, students need to think. Students don't think, students don't learn. So that is what it means. Yeah. So in this instance, we're talking about deep learning in the case of BICS just now. Yeah. So when we talk about teaching equals thinking, requiring the students to do that thinking is that mental processes. Like just now, Dr. Mazina, you're asking me how is it that we train our students from right brain dominated to also become left brain dominated. So you need to give them tasks that require them to move from being right dominated to the left dominated, or vice versa. For the scientists amongst your student, the one who's very structured and very fact-based, test them to become creative. For those who are creative and laissez-faire and relaxed, test them to be more alert and cautious about facts. So the 6 thinking hats could give you an idea of the kind of activities you could have. So they are all mental processes, and it's also a response to an external stimuli. For example, you give them the task, and they have to respond to that task. And it's the engine. Thinking is actually engine for learning. That's why I said in the second half of the equation, if you don't make your students think, they are not learning because there's no engine for learning. You did not supply them with the thinking tasks. So these are the art of thinking, yeah, cognition and metacognition. Cognition, in simple words, for those who are not familiar with the word, cognition is actually processing the information. That's cognition, how the brain process information. Metacognition is actually how the brain confirm that it is doing the job correctly. Meaning, for example, you're listening to me now, so your brain is processing. And then there's a little hunch, there's something in your heart that tells you, that gives you a question like this: is that true? Are you interpreting it correctly? Do you really think that is what she meant? That kind of thing, that little voice, that very small voice at the back of your mind, reminding you, asking you to confirm, asking you to validate. That is metacognition. Okay, cognition is actually processing information. Metacognition is actually checking whether the process of information is correct. All right. So all this is actually, as I said earlier, all the strategies to make our students think and for you to also be thinker teachers are all strategic. They are all strategies that can be trained. All right. Okay, I move on. All right. This is from Richardson. All right. Some quotation also from Richardson that says, Individuals create or construct their own new understanding or knowledge through the interaction of what they already know and believe, and the ideas, events, and activities with which they come in contact. So in this instance, what it's trying to say here is that there must be interaction, there must be engagement where the students need to be involved in. All right. Okay. So in this instance, again, I'm telling you, when we talk about teaching and learning, it must be in groups. It must be at least pair. The students need to be involved in activities where they need to do a lot of interaction. They need to bring in what they already know, put on the table and look at it and see whether this is relevant for them to make association with. And we talk about learning, I'm sure you have heard the word like association, assimilation, fossilization. And these are the words when we talk about. For you who are trainers, right? We talk about fossilization of information. It's there, it's stuck there. You to unlearn it, to relearn it, you need to unlearn it. So sometimes unlearning is difficult because it's fossilized. And then sometimes you say that, okay, to learn, you need to make association, meaning try to associate with something that they already know. That's association. Assimilation is when you gather the information and they are assimilated together so that they form a bigger picture. So those are the tricks and tips that trainers need to have at the back of their mind when they want to train their participants or their students something new. All right. Okay, moving on. So constructivism, I know you guys have heard this a lot, many times. Just look at the one that I have bold in the sense that where are we as their teacher? So we need to play the role as the facilitator, as the guide. So we are the co-explorer. So that is why I said when we talk about teaching and learning, yes, you are the teacher, but it does not mean that you're only the teacher. You can sit together with your students and be their co-participant in that group. You work together with them. You become a member of that group where you also learn from each other. You could also listen to your students and you will be learning something new from your students. That is what it's saying here. Yeah. Don't put yourself too high up a position that you cannot come down and sit with your student. That's very bad. Okay, this is solo taxonomy, which I thought is kind of interesting. Somewhat like Bloom's taxonomy. All right. But the difference with Bloom's taxonomy only signify the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domain in terms of the level of difficulty, from the easier one to the higher, to the difficult one. But in the instance of solo, it's very much of similar, but it's very much to the learning part. What do they do? What do they do so that they become more and more competent? So this is pre-structural. This also goes with constructivism. You cannot expect your students to be able to evaluate unless you have guided them from pre-structural to unistructural to multi-structural to relational and then extended abstract. So in other words, this is how you sequence your content. When you prepare your curriculum, right, the topics, you sequence the topics, you always begin with something which is basic, that the students will use this basic information to understand the second topic and the third topic. By the they come to the third topic, they should be able to explore further by making their own judgment, by coming up with something new. So this is what it means by from the pre-structural up to the extended abstract in solo taxonomy. Yeah. And of course, in solo taxonomy, to make it easy, even easier for you, just look at this. What can the student do at pre-structural? I'm not sure about this subject. At unistructural, I have one idea. At multi-structural, I have several ideas. At relational, now that I have got several ideas, I can make relationship and to see the big picture. And the extended abstract level, they are the helicopter view. They can actually look at all these ideas in a new and very different ways. So solo model, solo taxonomy, look at what the students are able to do. So in a way, it's telling the sequence. So in this instance, why am I sharing this with you? Because we are in the second half of the equation. It's all about the student now. What do you do to your students to make sure they think, right? Okay, and of course, Bloom's taxonomy, the bottom of the pyramid is a very simple task of being able to remember. To the highest, at the peak of the pyramid is creating. They are able to create. So if you relate Bloom's taxonomy with solo just now, yeah, if I want to go back from something yang I'm not sure, I just got one information. Okay, now I've got some idea and I've got several ideas. Now I can link these separate ideas together to a fact that I have the eagle's eye view or the helicopter view. Likewise, when you've got the eagle's eye views, the student will be able to create. So that is what it means. Bloom's taxonomy look at the different abilities, but Solo is looking at the student's ability in sequence. Yeah. Okay, moving on. So thinking is central in teaching. As I said earlier, it goes back to the student. So what is the strategy that you can use? It's the art of questioning. It's what Biggs call as deep learning just now, yeah? So when you apply reflective teaching, you want to make sure your students are also reflecting while they learn. So when you want to ensure that they are reflecting while they learn, it all boils down to the questioning. What did you question them? How do you question them? What kind of questions you give to them? So this is the point where when you think you are thinker teachers, you need to ensure that there's also dialogic pedagogy. So over here, I am coming towards the third quarter of my presentation, all right, where I'm combining central to teaching and central in teaching to form the complete equation, yeah, where T equals T equals T, and I am T squared just now, yeah. So we're in the first formula, T equals T equals T. So central to teaching and central in teaching. Where central to teaching, it begins with the teacher who needs to start the process of teaching by becoming a reflective practitioner. You need to think at planning stage, at implementing stage, and at the evaluative stage. Yeah. And when we say central in teaching, it's actually how you conduct your class through the art of questioning, because that means you're making the students think. Okay, so teacher thinkers wanna be. So you need to see here thinking as central to and central in teaching. Okay, slowly. This is the third quarter. We are coming to the third quarter of the talk. Yeah. All right. So dialogic pedagogy, one of the strategy, Dr. Mazina, you were asking, so what can we do to make sure that we can train our students to become thinkers, that we can make sure our students are using the whole brain when they learn from us. One of the best trick is dialogic pedagogy. So what is dialogic pedagogy? There is a need to balance between following the students' ideas and lines of reasoning and leading them towards insight and understanding of more abstract forms of thinking. So in other words, remember Bloom's taxonomy? From simple question, please list down the important factors that created noise pollution, example. All right, that's lower. But you need to balance it by saying, okay, now that you know these are the factors, how can we advise the city council to reduce? Now, these are the factors. So you are asking them to, like, now that you know this information, remember unilateral to multilateral just now from Solo? So you have asked them to make relationship and form a new understanding. So that is what we talk about in dialogic pedagogy. It's not just a matter of asking questions, but to balance what type of questions you ask so that the students can really use all the four quadrants of the brain. Yeah. Okay, moving on. This is just a very, very quick definition of what dialogue is. Yeah. So what is a dialogue? Dialogue is actually a unique form of conversation with potential to improve collective inquiry processes. Now, guys, dialogue is not just a dialogue at teh tarik session, where conversation, gossip, gelak-gelak, happy, wah-wah. No, dialogic pedagogy begins with the idea of what dialogue means. It means here we are chatting ourselves away. I'm learning something new from you. You are learning something new from me, and we put them together. We form a new understanding. So when we want to improve the inquiry processes, example, interview. All right. I'm sure everybody has done interview before. You will go and see your respondent, and then you will interview him or her, and he or she will give you the responses. Based on the responses, you ask more questions. All right. So it's what we call that a clarification question. You probe for further verification, or you ask questions to evaluate or to confirm that you have interpreted it correctly. So why did you have that kind of dialogue? You ask this question, she responded. Whatever that she responded, you use that to ask more questions, because you want to improve your inquiry process so that you get what you're supposed to get and not misinterpreted it. So this is what it means in dialogue. If you train your students by asking them the right question, they will observe you there themselves. When they conduct their own inquiry process, they will be asking relevant questions. Right? So this is what it means. It's a kind of force that guide how we think and how we act. You know? Okay. So in other words, dialogic pedagogy is an alternative pedagogy, because it means that we are talking about meaningful dialogues to promote CCTS. All right, CCTS is creative critical thinking skills. Yeah. So if you were to Google also, go for dialogic pedagogy, there are many articles and in fact some sample lesson plans, on how do you employ dialogic pedagogy in your lesson. So for those who are wondering and looking for new way of teaching your students, you might be tired of your own style. Why not you just Google, get some ideas how to teach your students whatever that you need to teach, but under the model of dialogic pedagogy. There's a template that you can use. What you do at first, what you do in the middle, and what you do at the end. When you introduce a lesson, and then when you start your lecture, and then you give your students activities, and when you conclude your lesson. So there's a dialogic pedagogy template that you can refer to. Okay, and I'm going to tell you this in advance. When you Googled it, eventually you will see that it's a lot about thinking. You give the students question. The students also ask question. Amongst them, ask questions to each other and whatnot. Okay, these are some extra information that differentiates dialogical and traditional teaching. So I'm not going to go through this thoroughly, but because I think you can read it, you can actually also, it's quite clear cut, yeah. So dialogical teaching is changing, it's negotiable, and it's not static. You don't know what the answer would be because it depends on the responses and whatnot. And of course, the role of the learner is different, the role of the teacher is different, and the kind of questions more open-ended and kind of authentic. Okay, so these are more just to impress you. Actually, I've got more diagrams and illustration to show you in monological teaching, meaning you give lecture only and there's no Q&A. Lecture only, there's no group work. Lecture only, there's no activity that encourages students for further engagement. So this is it. Try to avoid this. Once in a while, I understand, especially when you introduce something totally new to your student, then you need to give them the lecture. That's why we've got what we call the mass lecture and tutorial session, right? So mass lecture can be like this, but at tutorial session, this is when you break up the students into smaller groups, and then you give them tasks to encourage student engagement and stuff like that. So this is dialogical, where you are not really the expert. In this instance, teacher is the expert, but in the dialogical, you are the assistant. Remember, we talk about constructivism. We talk about teacher is also a learner. Teacher is a co-participant. So these are the things that we can talk about. Okay, towards the end, the quarter end of my lecture, my talk today is the thinker teacher wannabes. Do I have thinker teacher wannabes in this session? Anybody interested to become a thinker teacher? I hope there are, yeah? Okay, so this is what you take home with you. Number one, remember that thinking is central to teaching. What does it mean? If you claim to become a professional teacher, you must be a reflective practitioner. You always question yourself when you plan your lesson. Always question yourself when you are teaching. Look at your student, read their faces, look at their body language, reconsider the materials that you give your student, reconsider the activities and the tasks, reconsider your content. Too high for them to understand, too easy for them to find it boring. All right, so that is central to teaching. You begin teaching by thinking. Central in teaching is the art of questioning, where you make the students think. How do you make the students think? Dialogical pedagogy. How is that? Through asking them questions by giving them relevant tasks. And thinker teachers, you are both. You are the reflective practitioner, and you also practice the reflective teaching. All right. So the first order of business, all right, the first order of business is to fill yourself with the soul of teaching. Remember, I started the session by asking you what, why, and how. So in this instance, I'm focusing on the first two, the what and the why. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand that I think we are the selected few. Yeah? We are selected to become teachers, you know. Not anyone can become teachers. You are the selected few who are given the opportunity to become a teacher. You have been appointed. Yes, you received the letter from the institution, but if it was not destined by God Almighty, you may not end up here in UNIMAS. You may not end up here in UITM or wherever you are. You know, it has been destined that you become a teacher, whether you wanted it at the first place or you didn't want it. You would say, no, I didn't want to become a teacher. I didn't want to become a lecturer in UNIMAS. But this is the only place that I got a job offer. Yes, but then you think it happened because institution wants you to give the job and you didn't get it from elsewhere. It happened because God has wanted it to be that way, right? So in other words, you have been selected to become the teacher. So guys, what I'm trying to say here is that now that you are in this profession, please understand, how do you feel yourself with the soul of teaching? This is when I say teaching is the work of art and heart is the work of the heart. All right, you don't become a teacher just because you want the salary at the end of the month. No, please. You become a teacher because you care for your country. You care for your community. You care for your children. You care for the generation. You care for your afterlife, where that is the final destination and the forever and ever. All right. So when you feel yourself with the soul of teaching, you understand what teaching is all about and why, the niat, the niat. Inshallah, the how will come into place. You cannot do the how, you cannot improve the how if your what and why is You know, you're not clear with the what and you don't bother your why. So that's why if you're not clear with your what and you don't care your why, then your how will go down the drain. So that is why I started with the what and why before I go about the how. The how is that T equals T equals T, but the what and the why is very important. Okay, so simply put, you need to love teaching, be passionate, and be compassionate about teaching. All right. Frankly speaking, not anyone can become a teacher. You would say that I'm not that one. I'm not one of those who can become a teacher, but you are here. You are appointed as one. So what do you do about it? What do you do about it? So that's the thing. So to my mind, if I were to put this in bahasa Melayu, alang-alang menyeluk perkasam, biarlah ketangkal lengan. Begitu. In other words, now that you are in the teaching discipline, you are there, do your best. Whether you say that I didn't want to become one, but you are now one. You are now one. So what do you do about it? Are you going to give your best? Or are you going to be a chincai teacher? You know, so what are you going to answer to God later when God said, what did you do to your level best? You know, remember earlier on I talked about if you are not thinking, you are polluted mind, you have a polluted mind. And if you are unreasonable folks, then you are injustice, you are subhuman. Takkan nak jadi subhuman, right? Unfair. How are we gonna face the creator if we are like that? So this is the model, the T equals T model that I put in illustration. It's like a staircase, right? It's like going upward. So it begins with you, a teacher who thinks. Thinker teachers begins their responsibility by first thinking when they plan their lesson. When they have planned their lesson, they go to class, they teach, right? When they teach, they still think, are my students okay? Are they following me? Am I too fast? Is my slide too heavy with content? Do I need to pause, stop for a while, let them digest? What about the activities? What about the materials? And then you finish your class, you walk out of the classroom to go back to your office. Ask again question. How did it go, yeah? Did my students enjoy my class? They didn't, why, yeah? Or it's near the exam? Was I too serious about exam that I forgot to realize that they are also human beings, they need to also enjoy life? Stuff like that. So T equals T begins with the teacher himself or herself doing the thinking. And the second, and then you do the teaching, the students come into the picture, because teaching and learning, teachers always have students, students always have teachers. All right. So when the students come into the picture, that's the second half of the equation where the students need to do the thinking, and that is when central in teaching. Thinking is important in your teaching. Who doing the thinking? Not just you alone, the students. So how do you do that? I showed you solo model, solo taxonomy, and I showed you dialogic pedagogy, yeah? And I showed you the art of questioning. And at this point of time, I give you Edward de Bono's 6 thinking hats. I am now giving you Socrates, yeah? You know Socrates, right? Socrates, 6 types of questioning. There are 6 types of questioning by Socrates, from simple clarification up to questionable question. The 6 types, and there are sample questions. So you can have those questions within your lesson to encourage your students to do the thinking. Yep. And I am T-squared model. I've got the T shape there. All right. I like T because he's a teacher. Everybody is a teacher here, and passionate and compassionate and love our job. Do what you love what you do. All right. So I am T-squared model. Here you've got that central to teaching. The teacher do the thinking. And at the second level, the one at the top, the pillar is the teacher. This is symbolic, you know. The pillar, tiang. The teacher is the pillar. And come the student. And the student is depending. Without the pillar, the student will collapse. So that is why the pillar must be strong. Comes the student, comes the student here, and the students do the thinking. Inshallah, you are engaging the students and leading them towards deep thinking. All right. And moving on, bottom line is you need to teach thinking, yeah? Or sebenar-benarnya, in reality, you haven't taught at all. You may say that I teach them math. You may say that I teach them physics, chemistry, and you just give them the formula. It's monolingual, and you ask the students to memorize. There is no thinking on the part of the student. Lillahi ta'ala, I'm telling you, that's not teaching. You thought you have taught them. You thought that you have taught them, but actually you haven't taught at all. Now, guys, as a way forward, actually, Dr. Mazina, I'm saving the other half for Q&A. Would that be all right?
Perhaps you can expand a little bit, Prof. Around
Okay.
15 minutes, I think should be okay for the question and answer.
So what I'm trying to say here, okay, but I do have Q&A session. I think it's only fair because I'm here, I'm talking about dialogic pedagogy, and yet I'm monolingual. Right? We do like to have questions from the floor if possible. Yep. Okay. What I have on this slide now is to remind you that it's okay in the past, because remember Wallace's professional development, when we say that if you can't change what had been done, that's not important. What is more important is that you can start where you are now and change the ending. It doesn't matter that how it started. What matters more is that how does it end. Okay, I don't know who started it. Remember this phrase, I don't care who started it, but I want you to finish it. Gitu. So in this instance, it's okay. A reflective practitioner you are or you are yet to be, there's always a good time to start, and there's no better time to start than now. You know, so that is one that I have in mind. And I've already mentioned this just now, and Dr. Mazina asked me to elaborate a bit. Maybe I could elaborate this one. Yeah, I think this is very symbolic actually. I have this at the bottom. I hope you guys can see this. When we talk about being a reflective practitioner, you need to be a lifelong and life-wide practitioner. Lifelong learner. Lifelong and life-wide learner. Yeah? Lifelong learner, never stop learning. When you come to this session, for example, that is an example of you are enjoying learning. You always seek for opportunity to get new things. Maybe you already know whatever I've mentioned to you, you already know it before. But listening to it again is reinforcing it. So never say that I'm just wasting my time now, whatever she said, I already know. Yeah, but then don't be too egoistic and don't be too big-headed to say that, yeah. Because I would agree with you. I'm sure some of you already know what I've already mentioned here, but listening to it again is not a waste of time because it is re-emphasizing the facts and really trying to put that really in bed. And actually, here I am challenging you. I'm questioning you. Do you really think you have taught your students thinking? Do you really think that you have been a thinker person? That's my question, right? So to become a reflective practitioner, look at the bottom of this model, where are you a lifelong learner and are you a life-wide learner? Life-wide here referring to the fact that are you also well-versed in other content? You are a physics expert, you are a chemistry expert, you are a biology expert, you are an engineer, educator, you are an architect, educator. But do you know about language? Do you know about history? Do you know about the latest movies? Do you know what's the latest political issues? I don't want you to become political, but do you know about the latest policies? Yeah, I wanted to say policies. Do you know about the policies? Do you know what's the country going towards with Madani, for example? What does mean Madani in your context? So those are the things that you can actually do and bring into your students so that they can see how meaningful your lesson is. They would see that your class is not just about sitting for the exam. They can see that your class is training them to become a responsible engineer, because you're talking about you need to contribute back to the society, make your parents proud. Do you instill values? Do you bring them back to their parents? They are with you on campus and their parents in Semenanjung, for example. Do you bring their parents in your class? Do you bring the feeling, the emotion of their parents in that class? And that is how you motivate your students to be their best and to give their best, for example. And relate, for example, you're teaching them about design, for example, about design, right? And then you talk about how important design is, because at the end of the day, like for example, architecture, the design of the architect, architecturing, for example, coming up with a stadium. You're training your students to design a stadium. And here we are in Malaysia. You talk about culture, you talk about values, you talk about affection, what makes people appreciate it. Like the Twin Tower, you bring in Twin Tower and you talk about how did Tun Mahathir got Twin Tower to be designed the way it is. What does it symbolizes? There's Islamic perspective to it, and there is also what you call that, the structure. Yeah, it's Twin Tower, and then the color of it, and so on and so forth. You bring in values. If you study the history behind the design of something, so there you go. It's not just about formula. It's not just about theory. It's about life. It's about reality. It's what's really happening in Malaysia and the considerations that people do before they design something. So if you are in that design. So what I'm trying to say here is that it doesn't stop only at teaching English language. Although I'm from English language, you would say that these are only relevant when you teach language. I beg to differ. Regardless of whatever, even medic lecturers, even assumingly amongst you, there are medical lecturers here, medic faculty lecturers here. So how is it that you bring integrity? How is it that you bring credibility? How is it that you bring passion to your students? It's not just about treating their patient as another patient, but this patient is unique. This patient has feelings. This patient has families. This patient has likes and dislikes, so how do you deal with that? And the doctors to be also, how do you train them to become strong and solid, in the sense that they are not too emotional, or they are not too, but not to say too emotional that they become too solid, that they are ignorant of others' feelings. How do you strike a balance? So all that begins with you being lifelong learner and life-wide learner. And also come up with activities that the students need to come up with solution that requires a lot of thinking. So that is on the part of you becoming the teacher who thinks. And when you teach, go back to the students, okay, the T shape, which is at the top here, right? The students will depend on what you ask them to do. Your input. Remember my 3P model, teacher, input, right? Teacher provide the first input. So the input is the stimuli. What activities, what tasks, what materials did you give your students so that they can engage in that context? So, and in this instance, you need to practice reflective teaching, central in teaching, yeah, where you ask them the right question. I told you Socratic just now. I told you Edward de Bono just now. So those are the things that you can refer to when you want to decide on the types of activities and types of questions. And from time to time, let's not forget, yeah, our students are also adults. You would say that, no, I'm teaching 7-year-old. I have trained teachers at school, and they will say, no, they are 7 years old, they just come into standard 1, blah, blah, blah. But then I said, if you refer to Montessori, Maria Montessori, who's actually the expert in early childhood education, children need to be treated like an adult. What does she mean? What did she mean when she said that? Actually, we're talking about empowerment, giving the student responsibility, giving the students an opportunity to make decisions for their own learning journey and learning process. As an example, you give them a task where they need to make decision. Where do they start? You give them a project-based learning. Probably, I mean, I'm sure you have heard about this, right? Project-based learning, problem-based learning, case study, So at every stage of completion of that case study or project-based learning or problem-based learning, there's always thinking, there's always decision that they need to make. So if you instill problem-based learning, I know medic faculty employs a lot of PBL and case study. So this is when you want to hear from your students. If it were to be them treating this patient, this is a case study. This patient is actually in reality, it happened 10 years ago. So now let's say you were the doctor who treated this patient. What would you consider? What would you look at? What would you diagnose? What would you interpret the diagnosis or something like that? So you're testing them to use the right side of the brain. And then you ask them the question, did you consider the family? Did you consider the patient's feelings? Then you have moved them to use the right side of the brain. So again, I'm saying, it doesn't matter what subject you teach, doesn't matter which discipline, whether you're a scientific background or you're a social scientist, whether you're a scientist or you're a social scientist, or whether you're technical or whether you're management, you are still teaching human. There's still the need to make your students the responsible functioning human being in the community, in the society, and in the country. So that is what it means over there, yeah? So that's it I have at the moment. And hang on a minute. So over here, I've got something which is very, very interesting. I thought this is something which all of you need to also ponder. I remain humbly as a learner and a thinker always, inshallah. Thank you. So that's all that I have for today, Dr. Mazlina. I'm passing this back to you because I like to listen to the audience. I like to have this dialogue, let's talk more about it. I'm still keeping my sharing, and so that if you want me to go back and forth certain slide, I don't mind doing it, yeah. And if you need further explanation. So back to you, Dr. Mazlina, another maybe some 20-25 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof, for the wow. For the insightful and informative sharing from Prof. I feel motivated when I heard to your sharing, Prof, as a teacher. So I have a question, but before I ask you a question, I would like to open to the floor.
Yeah.
Is anyone here have any questions to Prof? You just need to unmute your microphone, or you can just text in the chat room so that I will read via the chat room. Anyone's from participants, do you have any question? Yeah, from from our participant Lai In Xuan. Yes, very motivating. Thank you very much, Prof. She said, yeah, this is very motivating. Anyone, if you don't have any question, then I would like to ask question. This one from our secretariat as well.
Okay.
Yeah, from Dr. Azra. She would like to ask you, how can we balance teaching, research, and management work as a teacher? Because as we know that Dr. Azra, like me, we have administrative position as well in University of Malaysia Sarawak. So how can we balance our teaching, our research, and our management work as a teacher?
Okay, thank you very much. This is a question I receive often, yeah? I receive often. And we need to realize that we are in higher education, yeah? That question would come from not cikgu. That question would come from lecturers. But actually, when I go to sekolah, when I give a talk to the school teachers, also sometimes they also say, how do you balance? And because at school, they don't really do research and admin. They do a lot of like Coca-Cola, they have to go their own training, and stuff like that. So it's about balancing. Okay, at the end of the day, you need to first understand your strength. What is your strength, or maybe what are your strengths? So what are your strengths? If your strength is not assisting you to balance your work, then you need to reconsider, because at the end of the day, it's our duty. You cannot deny the fact that yes, you have to do research, yes, you have to publish, you have to go to conferences, and when you hold an admin post, not just you, Dr. Mazina, even I'm also holding a post. I've been holding posts ever since God knows when, But we have decided to take it up, right? We have decided to take it up. We setuju terima lantikan. So when you setuju, again, I go back to that now why do. I go to the what and the why before the how. You ask me question how to balance, then I go back balik to the first what and why. So the first what, as an academic, it is your responsibility, your scholarship, the scholarship responsibility, the scholarly responsibility of an academic is to not just teach, but also to disseminate this knowledge through the community, through publication, through conferences, to sharing, and also to conduct research so that you rejuvenate your knowledge. You are always on top of things, you are always current. So you need to do research because you want to stay current. You do research because you want to bring the reality of the world out there into the four walls of the classroom. Because research is outside bound. You teaching is classroom bound. So that is why you do research. And remember, an academic in the university, you're not just responsible to your immediate student, you're also responsible to the community. So that is why you need to write. That is why you need to go to the conferences. You need to give talks, for example. And teaching is, of course. So the first what, are you clear? The first what of an academic is that. So if you're not clear, I didn't know I have to do research. I didn't know I have to publish. Alamak, you tak tahu your first what. So that is why I'm going back to that first what. You dah sign, you setuju terima lantikan as an academic in UNIMAS. And I don't want to use the word KPI, it's such a negative word to many of us, but it is, I would say, a responsibility. Responsibility, not just teaching. Even cikgu kat sekolah, they don't just do teach, they do co-curriculum, they go their own professional development training, So they also come back at 6 o'clock in the evening, they don't come back at 2 or 3. They also have weekend, they have to go to school for COCO. So everybody has responsibility. So as an academic, the first what to clear that. And then the second question is why? Dah tahu this is the what, then why? Why are you here? Why did you setuju terima? Go back to your niat. So then you have your how. So balancing tu, insyaAllah, you tak berkira your time, even if it means you have to burn the midnight oil to do your paper, even it means that you have to come to the campus on the weekend to discuss with your friends to write a research proposal, you don't mind. If it means that you have to take time off from your family to go abroad and present paper at conferences, you don't mind, because the what and the why to dah kuat, then the how will come very quickly. So I think balancing means time management. And I give you my story. I can't talk on behalf of others. At the moment, I'm holding a post as the Director of Academic Development and Management at ISAPS. Yeah. Before that, I was the Dean of the Faculty of Education. Before that, I was the pengarah of the Industry and Community Network, immediately directly under the Deputy Vice Chancellor of we call it JIM, Jaringan Industri Masyarakat. Before that, I was the Deputy Dean of Jaringan. Before that, I was the Ketua Pusat Pengajian Postgraduate. And before that, I did my PhD. So I have been holding posts also for so long, but Alhamdulillah, when I know my what and I know my why, I didn't have problems with the how. And one more thing, this is also my strategy. I don't know whether you want to agree with me or you want to adopt this strategy. I always have my family in the picture. For example, whenever I'm outstation and it happens to be school holiday, I will bring my family with me. When my kids were growing up, I've got 3 children, 2 boys and the youngest is a girl. So now they are 25, 20, and 18 years old. But I remember when I started my duty as an academic, I needed to do conferencing, I needed to do my writing. So we would go outstation, right? And it is school holiday, I'll bring them along and they will be at the swimming pool. And then I'll be at the table by the side of the swimming pool. I've got my laptop on and I'll be doing my writing of the article. And I have my target. In a week's time, this paper is out and ready to be sent for any conference or publication. And I know in 1 year's time, this is my personal target. Every year, I need to have at least 2 papers out. You know, that when I was not an associate professor, when I was just a doctor at that point in time, I just came back from PhD. I was not even a professor, Madhya. I said, okay, my target is every year 2 papers. How is it 2 papers? First 6 months, 1 paper. Second 6 months, another paper. And at that point of time, I never thought about index Scopus Q1, Q2 ke. It's just about, I realized as an academic, my contribution needs to reach out of the 4 walls of the classroom. So I already did publication without realizing that it's one of the things that is actually needed. So again, understanding your what. Duduk di higher education ni, our responsibility is also outside our classroom, to the community. So what is it? Give talk, write, publish, go to conferences, provide training, and do research. So inshallah, I hope I have answered that question.
Yes, Prof. Yes,
Okay.
you answer our questions. All right, Prof. We take another question from, I think, Madam Subasini. I don't know, perhaps Doctor. Hi, Prof. How you think exposure can be good teacher?
Okay. Exposure can be a good teacher. Have you heard of this phrase, University of Life? University of Life. So the more you are exposed to things, the more sensible you become. The more you would look at things you will have more and more windows to open. When you are young, okay, I use the word novice, yeah? Let's say in the life of an educator, we've got novice educator and we've got experienced educator. So according to Sean, if this is in the education discipline, yeah, SCHON, tapi dia punya O tu ada dot 2 dekat atas. I think it's Norwegian kind of spelling, yeah. So according to Sean, there are 2 types of educators, the novice and the experience. And the novice is considered those who are in their first 5 years of teaching. All right. Why 5 years? There must be some past studies confirming after the 5 years, people get more concretized. Remember COPE tadi? COPE's learning cycle kan, before things become concretized, you have to go through it, you have to experience it, you have to experiment it, failure, try again, successful, in bed, and observe something else and stuff like that. So that is why if you totally understand constructivism, if you totally understand mastery learning, if you totally understand learning cycle, and the Wallace's professional development model just now, it talks about getting the experience, receive knowledge and experiential knowledge built together. So when you've got that exposure, it is actually your experiential knowledge that help you to make better decisions. So that's why exposure is important. And how do you get exposure? That's a good thing about us at higher education. You can actually go out to conferences. You can actually, we talk about multidiscipline and transdiscipline. You get friends from different faculty. You've got friends from different university to work together in a project. That is actually what is allowable. It's actually not say allowable, encouraged or asked of us to do, right? So when you got exposure from people from different faculty, people from different university, you will see how they work, the work culture. They will see their emphasis, what would the scientists emphasize on, what would the social scientists emphasize on, what would the management emphasize on. So all this will make you more and more well-versed. So that makes you a better decision maker, inshallah. All right, that's the answer, inshallah, to the question.
Okay, Prof. There is another question from Madam Aifa Hani. How to cultivate the patient and compassion?
How to cultivate passion and compassion?
Passion and compassion, yes.
Okay. This is actually a very interesting question. Thank you for the question, because sometimes I always ask that question to myself. And to begin with, I would say, how is it that you stay passionate about your job? Okay, before we go into that, we need to be clear what it means by passionate and compassionate. Yeah, passionate means you are in love with what you do. It goes back to you. You are in love with what you do, and hence you don't mind making sacrifices to complete the task that comes with what you have to do. Compassionate, on the other end, is on the other side. It's not on you. Passionate is you. Compassionate is it is felt by external. Like your students can feel that you're passionate about your work, then you have compassion. If you're a doctor, your patient can't wait to hear your voice in the morning, soothing voice in the morning. Then you got compassionate because your patient looks forward to getting you, to listening to you, to hearing your voice, for example. So that is passionate and compassionate to my mind. Yeah. So when we talk about as an educator, that's why I say you are the selected ones, guys. When you become educator, you must have both. You must be passionate in what you do so that your stakeholders, your clients, your students can feel that you are a compassionate person because they could feel it. So how do you get to become patient or passionate about your work? To me, goes back to that first two questions, the what and the what and the what and the why. But on top of that, I think to respond to this question further, because I've already responded what and why, I would also go back to the fact that what else can you do better? My question to you: if you want to inculcate, the word was to inculture, is it? Inculcate, to inculcate passionate, being passionate and compassionate. I'm asking you that question. What else can you do? What else can you do better if not this? Then you should know yourself. What are your strengths? What are you good at? Because when you are passionate about something, you know that is what makes you seen good at that, and you yourself know that is what you are good at. So to me, how do you inculcate being passionate and being compassionate is to understand this is what you do best. If you think there's something else that you can do better than this, and that is why you cannot feel passionate about what you're doing now. Because you yourself are questioning, this is not what I can do best. I can do something else better. Then maybe you go back to your why. Then maybe it's time to exit. Wallahu alam, I'm not saying that I'm asking you to exit. But if you think you can do something else better, then that is where you could find your passion and your compassion. Because your passion and your compassion is not in the education field, it's not in becoming an educator. Don't do injustice to yourself. Don't torture yourself, because if you torture yourself, indirectly you are being unhuman to your students. I'm sorry for the word being unhuman to your students, because it also means that you are being injustice, you are not being fair to your student. They need more from you than just what you have to offer. I hope I answered that question. Yeah, the answer to that question
Okay,
is a question. What
a
else can you do
question.
better? What else can you do
All right.
better?
All right. Okay, Prof. There is another question from Dr. Surya, perhaps. Salams, Prof. Since you said we should always lifelong and life-wide learner, how much do you think Malaysia accept this?
Okay,
Because
how much?
there is the other question, Prof. I think I need to read the other question as well,
Okay.
because I think as Muslim, most probably lifelong is accepted, but
Mhm,
life-wide, it is
mhm.
really practices. And do Malaysians accept this? Okay, that
Life
is the
wide.
question.
Okay, I think.
Life-wide learner, yes.
Okay, thank you. Lifelong learner, everybody agrees. Yeah, but life-wide learner, there's a question mark. How far can Malaysian go with this, or rather, what is the acceptance level of Malaysian with regard to life-wide? I'm going to answer that question by coming back to what we understand with the word life-wide. All right, when we talk about life-wide, be mindful. We are the wisest creation. All right, and we need to also observe the reality of life, what is happening. So there are two things: right, wrong, black, white, yes, no, yin, yang. Right, so there's only two things. There's no gray. It's always black and white, nothing gray about it. Quran has already specified. So to me, life white, Allah has also mentioned, belajarlah until from the cradle to the grave, right? So when he says belajar, dia tak kata belajar tu cuma belajar benda-benda yang only acceptable by the religion, contoh. But you also need to understand why are certain things unacceptable by the religion. So that is why I think, so that it makes you become a wiser person when you make decision. So the way I understand life wide di sini adalah you need to also explore discipline out of your own comfort. Your comfort here, I would refer, for example, in my case, I'm an educationist. So I also study engineering a bit. I also study architecturing a bit so that I could bring it into my class. For example, just now I talked about design. When you design the stadium, you need to also put in values, cultural values, the things that aspire or inspire the society nearby. How can that actually boost their economy in the sense that it becomes a landmark, a tourist attraction and whatnot, and put in historical element into that design so that it really concretizes the place as something which is, worth visiting. So as a language person, I wouldn't know that unless I've spoken to my friends who's in the architecturing discipline, right? And that's what's common sense, but all at the same time. And when you read current news, for example, with Madani, and then you make comparison with what has happened to the country over the last few decades and where are we towards, but you look at the good side of it. Do not get too agitated or worried or anxious about the negative side of it. What you need to bring in is focus on the positive side of it. You want to remain positive, look at the positive thing. But peripherally, there are negative aspects. But you know the values. At the end of the day, we've got our ethics. The code of conduct as an educator, remember that, yeah? Memang life wide is there, but do not misinterpret by saying that we need to accept things which are non-acceptable in the religion, in the curriculum, in the education. Be guided by the falsafah pendidikan negara. Be guided by the rukun negara. Be guided by our religion. Be guided, for me being a Muslim, be guided by what is permissible in Al-Quran. Those are the words of Allah. So if you have that, metacognition tadi kan, cognition and metacognition telling you, hang on, betul ni, correct ni, that's metacognition. I think insyaAllah, becoming a life wide is not a threat. In fact, it boosts you. It makes you a better educator because you are a life wide person.
Prof,
Okay. Yeah.
can I say that even though we have opportunity to learn, we call life wide, become a life wide learner, but we have to beware that if we learn the other person's area and then we are not really expert in that particular area, we have to aware that we are not going to overclaim on that.
Correct. Yeah.
In that area, right?
Correct. This is what we call the ethics, integrity also, code of conduct. I think it's more of integrity di situ, Dr. Mazrina, when you need to have a disclaimer. I come from education, but here I am talking about design, architecturing, stuff like that. But I'm not saying that I'm an architect educator, but these are the things I need to make what do you call that? Assimilate, try to show that there are possibility in other disciplines as well. Okay.
Yeah. So we make like what we call the name that we call right now is a transdiscipline, right, Prof?
Exactly, transdiscipline, multidiscipline.
Life wide. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So I think I would like to ask you the last question. Is it okay, Prof?
Okay. Oh yeah, sure.
Since you are showing us with the models, and the theory just now, it is all the model and the theories you showed to us appropriate to use for to other background of the student. It's not only for certain background of student like education, but it is also able to use for engineering students, to the counseling students, to the cognitive students, and so on. Isn't it, Prof?
Yes, it is, because learning is a process which is similar in nature, regardless the students are learning math or learning English language or learning how to operate a patient. So it's still a learning, because we're talking about constructivism, learning from a better able person. That's we got skills and his scaffolding. It's also about engagement. Students need to be motivated so that they will understand why they are doing what they're doing or what they're learning what they're learning. So regardless of what subject, we do not have a different theory to describe learning for scientific discipline. We do not have a different theory to describe in the social sciences, this is what it is. Actually, the learning theories is relatable regardless what discipline is, because learning process by nature is similar. We still have the same brain. The brain, the what do you call that? The how the brain is constructed is the same. Cognition process is the same, but what differ is our personality, our preference, our schemata, our prior knowledge, and our attitude, our what do you call it, perception, how we look at things, from how we interpret, because we look at it from different windows, right? But learning goes through the same process. You don't there's no shortcut, or there's no a better route for a different discipline. The tasks are the same. Remember Solo? Remember Bloom's taxonomy? It is applicable to all students regardless discipline.
So perhaps thank you very much, Prof. So do you have any last word, Prof, to all participants?
Okay, my last words, my last word for the day, for the day with you today, is I sincerely hope from the very bottom of my heart that there's something that has inspired you from my 2-hour session with you. If not a lot, but at least something that has inspired you to do justice to the 2 hours that you have spent with me this morning. And I sincerely hope you know your what and your why before the how can come into place. You know, the what and the why is very, very important. Find your why. Yeah, there's actually a book on finding your why. You know, it begins with why and finding your why. Cari buku tu dekat bookstore. All right, very interesting a book to read. All right, so you need to understand your what and your why. Those are 2 questions I leave you with. Hopefully you go back in your spare time, while you drive home, while you have your lunch, while you talk to your friend. This could be a topic that you can talk to, engage in that dialogue where it's towards, you know, a process of getting collective inquiry. It's dialogical just now. So my sincere hope that we all, including myself, become a better person than what we were yesterday. If there is a competition, there's always a competition only with you yesterday. You're only competing with you yesterday. What are you today? Don't worry about competing with anyone else. You know, you are only competing with yourself yesterday. Was yesterday a better you than today? You compete with that person. All right. So inshallah, find your what, clear with your why, and the how will come into place. So those would be my last words with you today. And I wish you all the very, very best. We all want to become the best version of ourselves each and every passing day, right? So my prayer to everybody that we are passionate and compassionate about our job. About this is not really a job; it's actually not a profession. This is what we do. All right, before we are called back to see the Almighty, you know, to face the Almighty. So remember, God has selected us. We are the selected ones to become educators. Yeah, it's not by design, it's not by default, it's not by choice. It's actually by destiny, Allah's destiny. Inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof, for the tremendous sharings. I hope that all participants have found this sharing valuable and benefit to be an inspired teacher, educators, and lecturers, whether in school, university, or other educational institutions. Thank you very much, Prof, for the inspiring motivation. Great content for us for today. Alhamdulillah. Perhaps next time ada rezeki kita boleh invite lagi Prof ke Universiti Malaysia Sarawak, insyaAllah. So for the participants, we have our upcoming workshop this coming Friday, 24th of May 2023 on Canvas Creativity, Mastering Slide Design by Mr. Azri Ali from Faculty of Art and Creative Universiti Malaysia Sarawak. Please come and join us virtually. So by then, thank you very much to all participants and to again our honorable speaker, Professor Dr. Faiza. InsyaAllah kita jumpa lagi, Prof. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Bye.
Thank you, Prof.